This is a message from the past to those watching in the future. Thanks for joining us. We're glad that you decided to watch this video. Those of you who are here live, it's the present and it's wonderful. We are going to, I'm going to introduce our first our first reader this evening, our featured guest, our headliner, our delightful wordsmith, soothsayer of sayings. I need to get off this screen so that we can just go right into it. But Danielle Roberts, I've known Danielle, I'm going to say the better part of 13, 14 years. We've definitely crossed paths in many places. But Danielle was one of the first people who I knew, and then also was pleasantly surprised to see, because I ride the bus everywhere, and I was so pleasantly surprised to see someone I knew whose poetry was now on the bus, and every time I got on the bus, I saw their poem on the bus for months, and it made me so happy that, wow, poetry can be seen in public. Poetry can be viewed, and I might know them personally. Danielle, you read at probably the first couple of open mics I ever did, and the Over Social Mofo review many years ago. It is with great pleasure that I present to you one of the coolest people I've ever met on a microphone. Please welcome Danielle Roberts.
Thank you for the introduction, Mike. I also very fondly remember the Over Social Mofo reviews. I think I went to every single one of them that you put together. So I was constantly in the audience if I wasn't trying to wend my way on stage. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you to Poetry Center San Jose and Willow Glen Library and all the amazing librarians who work in Santa Clara County. I'm really happy to be reading for you tonight. I lived in Santa Clara County for most of my life. I started off in Gilroy, all the way at the bottom, and then just steadily crept up to the top of the county for the last 30 something years. And so a bunch of my poems are inspired by that. And so you'll probably hear little glimmers of San Jose peeking through some of the things. I'm often inspired by art and science, and so you'll hear a few poems about that as well. And so on that, I am going to go ahead and just start with a piece that's inspired by Gilroy, which is where I grew up. Teaching your daughters to fly. The day after they burnt the slaughtered piles of blackberry bushes, my father and grandfather chained the water tower to a tractor, tore its head from its rusted legs, revealing a blink of bleary owlets screaming at the overturned sky. My father launched them flightless into the gray air with the sweep of a weathered broom handle. I can still see my mother's arms outstretched, hunting the air for falling children. I promise no owls were harmed in the making of that poem. They all made it safe and sound to my mother's arms. Everybody lived. Everyone's still probably flying around in Gilroy somewhere. So this next poem was published in DMQ Review, which is a literary journal that I think is local to the Bay Area. Sally Ashton, who is a poet laureate in San Jose, I think is on the editorial board. And per Mike's introduction, when my poems were rocketing around San Jose on a bus, Sally was responsible for that program. So this poem is called Velveeta and Antique Tiaras. When the perfect thing comes along, The choice is easy, though ease is understandably relative, as are all things really. And most folks who know me would say that the choice I made was right and in keeping with what they know of me and how I am. Not to say that all I am is antique tiaras and dramatic capes, the kind of drama that only comes from childless aunts perfumed with gin and too much money, without any sense of purpose. Not that only children give us purpose. In fact, there's a distinct lack of purpose around most children. I admire their commitment to the present. In some ways, I identify with that in these times where there's nowhere to go and nothing to do and nothing to be and no persona to puppeteer through social spaces and shared offices. In some ways, it's like being a child again. The things we can control are so minor, so vanishingly small. Maybe that's what's behind my craving for grilled cheese sandwiches. I suppose it all comes full circle. I never really grew out of dressing up or eating fake plastic cheese. So, as I stated in my intro, I lived in some part of Santa Clara County for my whole life. And so this next poem wrestles with thoughts of leaving Santa Clara County after spending my entire life here. It's modeled after Jean Ann Verlee's poem, Helen Considers Leaving Troy, which is a fantastic poem. And this poem mirrors the structure of her poem and is in conversation with her piece. And it was recently published by Painted Red Quarterly and is featured on their podcast, The Slush Pile. And it's called How Can I Leave This Behind? After a floral gin cocktail, do I want to live and die my whole life here, buried in county lines? Or is it time to stretch the map? There's more to plan than simply running away. While holding my niece, picking up the baby doesn't help. I smell her hair and wonder if she thinks of me when I'm out of sight. Will she know? Her eyes stare into the distance along with mine. Maybe she travels in her dreams. Maybe she lives elsewhere. While eating dinner, gorging myself on routine, I chew bread and think about the bagels in New York. I live these sourdough rituals, oven baked in centuries of families, a young tradition, bound by water on all sides. They say it's in the water. Doubtful. I gnaw on my nails. When people ask if I'll have kids, come on, Karen. I just blew up my life, and you're asking if I'm ready to be a sacred vessel. The only answer I can give is to flee far away from anyone who had dreams for me or thought I could be marriage material. Go where all folks care about is which street I live above in the gridlocked graph, or whether I'm walking fast enough. Blend. It would be easier than questions of barrenness. When my ex wants to get back together, absolutely not. From the freeway exit. Behind the wheel of my car, I carve trenches yet again, circle and retrace my path, map the small universe on foot, pace my cage. Maybe I take to the night sky or simply head east until I hit water. Gorges and grooves heal scarred cutting board life. Do I keep driving? Where do I even go from here? These dreams that weren't mine now festering in my wake. What city takes such hazardous rot? How do I leave my family behind? How do I tell them I'm already gone? So after that last poem, I actually did make a decision to move to New York. But I managed to land in New York City in the beginning of March of 2020, which was not the best timing in the world. And at the time when I landed, I was living with a doctor who was working frontline at a hospital in the Bronx with COVID patients. And so this next poem is inspired by that experience of living in a city that normally is known for all of its activity. And suddenly it is just hushed. And so this poem is called First Month in New York. And it was published by the Jabberwock Review, and it was a finalist for Nancy D. Hargrove Editor's Prize for Poetry. First month in New York. I've seen a bedroom so far. A bathroom, a living room, altar cluttered with candles and bones, walls papered with dried plants, stars, botanical illustrations, an inked universe. Most mornings, I see the small kitchen with its black countertops, copper tea kettle licked with flame, hand-chased silver teapot that we found in the Hudson Valley. It feels decadent in a way we are not. There's one tree outside, and then thousands of empty apartment eyes staring, breathing loudly through our open windows. Ambulances and dog barks, someone always playing the tuba, cars louder than they have any right to be, and a few blocks away, hills of silently sleeping dead. The computer screen flickers. My lover's face clocks a different time of day. We hold hands, stroll through Monet's garden, wait for the walls to open their lungs and arms. Until then, we promise to meet outdoors each time we dream and try to remember the color green. So, as much as my work is informed by the world around me and my experiences and places, I'm also really inspired by the marvelous happenings in our world and scientific discoveries, science in general. And so this next poem is about a green comet that quite recently swept past Earth for the first time since the Stone Age. It was visible to the naked eye if the conditions were like just right and it was dark enough. And it would be better if you had binoculars or like a long exposure camera lens, but you could see it without any of that. And I don't know, it was just an enchanting thing, a green comet visiting us. So this is called Wandering Star for C 2022 E3 ZTF. For the first time in 50,000 years, the comet knocks on the fresh door of earthen eyes and glitters green against the starless sky. Trailing ghosts and gaseous glitter, the nighttime grifter, the wandering star whose sleeping fell from the tall shelf of the galaxy and flutters its eyes the closer it comes to our sun. You might be able to see it if you squint. There, sandwiched between the North Star and its neighbor, there, its fingers trail along the spine of the Great Bear casually as a lover. I scoured the sky for any sign of you. An errant wing, the wind carrying small missives. Once I escaped the small city and stretched skyward toward the north and the east, listening and waiting for that smoked flash of emerald. I didn't have the right equipment, but even the scientists admit I might catch you by throwing my own pain and suffering on the altar of your gaze, by staying up all night, waiting for that which has made me, that which is so loosely tied to this world. Um, so like the last poem, this next poem is also a science poem. And it too was recently published by Painted Bread Quarterly. So the poem is about one of the ways in which scientists are racing against the effects of climate change. So for context, a group of international scientists are coming together to preserve information about the history of the Earth by drilling very, very long cores of ice out of polar ice caps before they melt. So the glaciers at the poles formed over millions of, I guess, long time, hundreds of thousands of years of snow, and just accumulating in layers and compressing. And so each layer is a little bit different and has data about the molecular and chemical structure of the Earth and its atmosphere at the time. So by examining these layers, you can see ways in which our atmosphere has shifted composition over time. And since the glaciers are melting and we're going to lose this valuable data, there are scientists who are trying to preserve that in some way, basically just sticking them in a giant freezer in Colorado, and also I think in Sweden. So this is called Extracting Memories. Speak to me in layered tongues of bitten snow, slow molars carved with frost, collected in the valleys between your teeth. The scientist bores a core, plucks the long memory from each glacier. This meter holds your first bicycle ride. This, a bridal veil of volcanic ash from Pompeii. 6 cylinders of centuries trespass the sterile air, blink at the unforgiving sun. From the dentist chair, you look up at the light, and this persistent body shrinks, cracked with age and use. Our indestructible jaws crumble with heat, losing enameled eons to inaction, forgetting to stitch our gums with floss. It's far too late to mend our habits now. Best to preserve what we can. Each line, a thought pulled out of context, precious archive of time before tales. We transcribe the answers to our final test without any chance of knowing the questions. So this next poem was also published recently in Painted Bread Quarterly. And I was trying to write some variation of this poem or some of these poems for quite a while. But then when the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, it kind of came together. So there are 3 sections in this poem, and they are different vignettes, but they're tied together by a central theme. Reassurance. 1. My cat startles and I tell her nothing bad is happening, but we both know that's a lie on a large enough scale. She hears the neighbor's doors slam, the child in the ceiling crying like an injured mouse. She knows footfalls on the landing lead to the wretched doorbell. Uninvited guests lead to us coaxing her to accept strangers in her home. She knows the rush of sirens down Oak or shouts from the narrow park must mean something, in the way we all know that one thing always leads to another. She turns a pale eye toward me as if to say, just because it's not happening to me doesn't mean it's not happening. 2. As we wade into the cold mountain lake, my sister promises me nothing's going to touch your feet. Maybe some grass or a fish, but I've never seen anything bad here. She shifts the baby to her other hip and walks deeper. Her husband rows away from the widening rings of sunscreen, filming the top of the swampy water, oil slick of caution. I know she loves me. Later, I scramble onto the inflatable raft and hold the baby and my breath. My sister stays rooted in the water, picking the leeches from between my toes. Doesn't glance down at her own feet, not even once. Her husband saw the signposts on the shore and told no one. He thought they didn't apply anymore. He's never noticed anything in the waters. 3. My boss sends a message before an important meeting to ask if I can still lead in light of the news. I reassure him, yes, I'm in California. I'm not affected for now. In the crowded room, the men make small talk, but have nothing to say. So this last poem, I didn't want to end on the down note. So this last poem is a new poem. And the title is a reference to a Sappho fragment, which is sweet mother, I cannot weave. Slender Aphrodite has overcome me with longing for a girl. So this is called Sweet Mother, I Cannot Weave. I'm going to stop you there before my brain catches up to what we've done, before my hips start to hurt, before your jaw or your hands give out, before the ghosts start chasing me down the halls, before your name's shape is unfamiliar in my mouth, before I invent time travel, very specific, frustrating time travel, before I freeze or start to cry or can't catch my breath or a single break, just let's stop here and let me look at you. Your curls wet and shining, your fingers webbed with weaving silk, and both our hands scribbling missives to Aphrodite. I want to join you here, serve you platefuls of lotus flowers, and languid we stay and forget the past. I want to pick the present's path from these thorn thicket thoughts. It must be here. I know it is, because somewhere you're walking the trail. I can almost see you waiting for me, turning back to extend your hand to help me catch up. Thank you for letting me read for y'all tonight.
Thank you so much. That was lovely.